Hey everybody, Professor Snart just checking in for our, as we move into Unit 2 of our Brit Lit class here, and I'm just looking at my first video announcement, which hopefully you had a chance to watch. Gripping, I know. If anybody uses YouTube to do anything like this, you'll know that it automatically gives you an option, a fairly limited option of still images to choose for the one that sits there when people are just looking at or waiting to watch the video. And I don't know if I should spend a lot of time like this or like this, but it seems like inevitably the still is this weird shot of me doing something weird. But anyway, I don't choose that, just so you know. Okay, so we finished up Unit 1, which was due yesterday, which is Thursday. So I'm going to click myself into our due dates then, and we get into much more of the content of the course. So Unit 1, pretty simple introductions. Thanks for two people who posted their, obviously got their student homepage done with the picture. It's really, hopefully you're feeling this already, it makes a huge difference to actually just see people, even in image, let alone video, to feel kind of connected to a class. So hopefully you got that done, and the introduction discussion board, again, pretty simple. If nothing else, just good practice to at using the discussion board feature if you haven't maybe done that before in Blackboard. And then special thanks to folks who either intentionally or just because they didn't know responded, to a whole bunch of people on the board. It's actually relatively simple given our small class size, so it's even nicer to get kind of responses to lots of different people. So thanks if you went above and beyond just the required number of replies to people. Something I'll also remind is, if you haven't already, is to go back into the student homepages area and make sure you look at everybody's, because it defeats the purpose if you don't. And they should be visible. I don't think you can comment or manipulate them, probably a good thing. But you can certainly look at them and at least, again, find out some information about people, but also put a name to a face, which is really important. I actually wish there was a feature, especially that you could turn on for a class like this size, where every time you posted something to a discussion board, you would have a little icon with, your face, which is how a lot of other discussion boards work. There's a little icon that represents the person who's, posting. But anyway, as far as I know, there's not that feature. I guess you could post your picture in every single discussion board post just as part of it, but you're not required to do that. Okay, so onward and upward, Unit 2. First thing that I'm just going to click myself in here, you may have received an email from me already that what I am trying to work with as we move through the course here is trying to figure out some of the best ways to provide kind of that more lecture-y information without it just being a big blob of text on the screen that you've got to read. Basically how to provide a PowerPoint so it's not just a file that you need to then save to your computer or open up or have to deal with some way, but something that's sort of embedded in Blackboard. And I think I came across a pretty good method here. It's a PowerPoint that I would normally give in class, accompanied by some audio annotations, or basically me just talking over the individual slide, and you can click your way through it at your own pace and go backwards and forwards and stop and start and all that kind of stuff. So it's the very first thing that you'll find in the Milton Paradise Lost lecture notes and context. And I'm really interested to get some feedback from you on, first of all, does it work just from an IT perspective? Because sometimes things that work on my computer don't work on yours, or things that work on one computer don't work on another. You know how that goes. So hopefully this is sort of across the platform going to function. And it's pretty simple. You just click the little play button. It sort of operates like a video, or thinks of itself as a video, even though you're just clicking through slides. And you'll see a little speaker icon in some of the slides, not all of them, that you can click.
Hey there, welcome.
Hey there.
Milton, Paradise Lost Howard.
And then, yay, it's me talking. Like I said, there's those annotations on most of the slides, but not all, and of course you want to read through the information on the slides itself. So hopefully that works and is useful, and I'm interested to get some feedback. So Let me back up a little bit though, and each of the units is set up pretty much the same way. It obviously has a title that suggests kind of the scope or the focus for that unit. There's a reading assignment. This is one of those reading assignments that I'm kind of dubious about. It's sort of the only way to do it because what you're reading is selections from Paradise Lost, which is an enormously long work. It's 12 books, and it's fairly dense in passages. So it's a great one to take on if you really are interested in kind of expanding, sort of backwards expanding your knowledge of English literature. And what you'll discover, and kind of what I've highlighted a little bit throughout the unit here, is that the reason we read Milton is not really for Milton's sake. And if you were to read the entirety of Paradise Lost, you'd realize that you learn a lot about Milton in that particular time period. But in fact, the sort of shadow that he has cast with that work, specifically, that's still with us today in terms of literary and cultural, broadly cultural influence, is really enormous. So it's interesting to go back to that as kind of the source text for so many ideas that are so culturally prevalent. In fact, the one that's maybe stuck with us the most and even inspired the Romantics, which is sort of the next group of writers that we'll look at, is the idea of the relationship between the creator and the created. So Mary Shelley's Frankenstein becomes, one of the next most important expressions or explorations of that theme. And then there's lots afterwards, like more recently Blade Runner would be a good example. Just about every graphic novel or superhero explores in some way the relationship between the creator and the created. I was flipping channels the other day and ran across the X-Men movie where Wolverine, flashes back to his creation as Wolverine at the hands of this weirdo military general. It's funny how that particular narrative always plays out the same way, but fundamentally that's an exploration or the question of the relationship between the creator and the created, and what responsibility does the creator have, what free exercise of free will does the created have. So in many ways you can trace that back to Paradise Lost as not the first expression of that, but as one of the fullest or most complete or most nuanced, if you want to call it that. Anyway, the point is that we certainly can't read the whole thing just for reasons of time. So we're reading selections, which is sometimes honestly more confusing than if you were to just read the entirety of the piece. So I've provided some summaries of the books or of the sections that you'll be reading, so you're not going in totally into the deep end. But it does take a while to get used to the language of Milton. The sort of way that he puts sentences together is more Latinate than what we're used to. But once you get the hang of it, it actually flows. There's a fairly regular kind of rhythm to it. It's unrhymed, but there's still a rhythm there. And again, like I've made clear throughout the unit here, what we want to look for as we read Milton is really how he sets the scene for so much of what will follow as far as what later writers will be interested in. So particularly the Romantic period, which is really where our course begins. So actually reading Milton is kind of cheating backwards. They were, like Milton, really embedded in their political and cultural and historical time period, but they were concerned with some of the most fundamental questions about humanity, which was exactly what Milton himself was exploring. So questions of free will, again, the relationship between the created and the creator, and if the creator is all-knowing, how does that work for the created, and who has, the sort of right to do what they want in some ways. And then what's the role of, in Paradise Lost, what's the role of Satan or Lucifer, who's the same character, as this kind of demonic but rebellious figure? Like I've made clear in the unit, a lot of later Romantics understood Milton, or I always do that. I mean to say Satan, but I say Milton, which is exactly what the Romantics would say. That Satan at least as far as when he's Lucifer in the poem, like before he gets really evil, he's just sort of evil at this point. He's basically rebelled in heaven against this, what he says is this tyrannical ruler in the figure of God. And why does God get to be number one? Like, who decided that? Why can't I be number one? He says to himself. And so for Milton, there's no question that Lucifer's in the wrong, right? You just don't do that. But a lot of the later romantics found in Lucifer that kind of rebellious energy that they found kind of inspiring, in the sense that they lived in a time period where throwing off the yoke of oppression and tyranny was all around them. The American Revolution, revolutions at home in England, and most particularly the French Revolution, right, which started as this very inspirational uprising of the people against this tyrannical monarchy. So a word like tyrant, when it shows up in Paradise Lost, is just freighted with all of this other kind of baggage, just like it is for the Romantics. Okay, I'm just going on and on. The point is that we're reading Milton in large measure to discover in him some of the roots or the seeds that we'll then find expressed again in the Romantic period, even if the Romantics were often guilty of misreading Milton. Okay, so I'll let you get into the selections. They're not long necessarily, but you do want to kind of make sure you know what you're reading before you're getting into it. Be sure you work through the lecture notes and context. I don't know if you'd want to do that first or second. It's up to you. And then we have a Paradise Lost discussion board. So if you have any questions, be in touch with me. I'd love to get some feedback on this PowerPoint feature that I've got in there to see if it's working for people. Otherwise, I'll be back in touch in a few days.